What is up, guys? Dzeeff here, and welcome to a Polar Vortex edition of the Q&A that I do every 10,000 subscribers that we hit on my channel. We just hit 90,000 subscribers. Actually, by the time that this video goes up, I think we'll have 91,000 subscribers, which is pretty crazy to me that we're less than 10,000 subscribers away from that 100,000 mark. We'll get that plaque. It'll be wonderful. I've got a lot of stuff planned for that, but for now, I want to focus on the Q&A that I posted a week ago in the community tab and asking you guys, what kind of questions do you have for me? And this is kind of become tradition on this channel, and I really like that. This is an excellent time for me to sort of talk to you guys and answer some questions. I obviously do that a lot during the live streams, which if you want to check out, they're just right here on YouTube. I try to stream like 4 to 5 days a week, but overall this is an excellent way for me to actually get some feedback from you guys and answer some questions in a more open way, not just the live streams, a way that actually sticks around something in a video. Anyway though, let's get to the first question, and it says, congrats on 90k Dzeeff. My question, albeit with an introduction to this: as your popularity and presence within the Yu-Gi-Oh community on YouTube grows, you've been exposed to both the growing support of your fan base and also to the ugly side of said community with comments from toxic, elitists, and players who despise your opinion of an archetype or anything related to Yu-Gi-Oh if it doesn't match theirs, which is all very true. Despite your love for that game, how do you keep yourself motivated to put out videos to your fans like myself while also dealing with that part of the community? There are a couple answers to this. The first answer, and I think the most obvious one that a lot of people say whenever I bring up negative comments, is that when you're a YouTuber, when you're like a content creator, anything along that sort of business, you have to just get used to negative feedback. Like, not everyone's gonna be positive. It's one of the things that I think is really funny about myself when I was like a smaller channel. You know, I'd get like one negative comment like maybe every week, and I'd be like, oh man, that negative comment's gonna like eat me up all week. How do I make this person like me or whatever? Once I hit like 20,000 subscribers, I just kind of realized, and I just accepted, not everyone's gonna like me, and that's perfectly fine. Not everyone has to like me, as long as the overwhelming majority of my viewers are enjoying the content. That's all that I really care about. So that's sort of the short answer, is that like most people that are in this job realize that you have to have a thick skin. I mean, every single aspect of me has been critiqued and analyzed on all sorts of ways, and I just kind of have to deal with that because overwhelmingly the reviews for my videos have been pretty positive, which is great. Also for me personally, I think for a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh channels, one of the ways that I sort of really like this job is that when I go to events, I get to talk to players that say like, hey, I was able to get my first invite because of a video of yours, or hey, I was able to deck build better because of your explanation of like Egyptian God cards or Pot of Desires, or hey, I was able to understand a ruling and I got my ruling questions right all event because I watched some of your videos. That sort of feedback is really great to see as a content creator. It's cool to know, because you know, when I'm making these videos and I'm just putting them out there, I don't really know if like I'm actually helping anyone, but when I go to events and talk to people that say, hey, this specific video actually really did help me with this specific thing, that's a really cool way to sort of show that what I do actually matters to someone out there. So overall, I just sort of take the positive as the biggest factor when I put out videos, and I don't really try to think of the negative too much. No matter what you do, wherever you are in life, there's always going to be someone that doesn't like what you're doing. Don't focus on that too much. Just focus on the people that do like what you're doing, and then continue to do that, sort of help those guys out and see like, hey, I'm still making good stuff. Stick around and you'll see even more of it, and don't focus on the negative too much. The next question says, do defense points matter, and if not, when did they stop being relevant? And this is actually an interesting discussion. I don't think it's worth doing like an entire video on, but I will talk about it for a little bit here, because I did make that video a couple months ago, like, do attack points matter? And I thought that had a lot of good discussions, but defense points, I mean, they matter even less than attack points, because attack points, I mean, they really matter, because that's what sort of matter, because you get to like run over stuff by battle, and that's a pretty big portion of the game. Even in like 2019, there's so many destruction effects running around, you still do the majority of your damage by running other monsters over with your monsters, so attack points definitely matter. But when you come to defense points, that's a little bit trickier. I would say that sort of they matter, less so than attack points, which already don't matter too much. The reason being is that I think defense points matter the most when you have cards that you actually want to play in defense mode. That might sound weird, but what I'm talking about is that like in 2019, when you're playing someone in defense mode, a lot of the times it's because a card is forcing you to, like in the case of Altergeist Multifaker, or it's the case where you're bricking, and like when you draw like a couple of hand traps and no other starter cards, sometimes you just like set a hand trap, and in those cases, yeah, the defense points do matter. It matters that Altergeist Silicoides, however you pronounce that guy, can't be killed in battle with Sky Striker Ray, because Ray is 1500 attack and Silicoides is 1500 defense. That sort of interaction matters. If one of those just had 100 more or 100 less, it might actually make the Altergeist Sky Striker matchup a little bit more difficult for Altergeist or Sky Striker, depending on which way that went. went. Also, like in the case of setting hand traps, the fact that Ghost Ogre and Ash Blossom and Winter Cherries and all those types of cards have 1800 defense instead of 0 defense actually matters a lot. All it takes to figure that out is to brick when you have like hand traps like Droll and Lockbird and then Ash Blossom. Which one do you set? Well, a lot of people set the Ash Blossom because, you know what, in a lot of cases people actually aren't summoning more than 1800 attacks worth of stats on the first turn unless they're playing like a big combo deck. But a lot of times that you set like a hand trap with 1800 defense, your opponent just like crashes into it and then continues to make their plays in main phase 2. So you can sort of buy yourself a battle phase by setting a monster with 1800 defense. Also, I would say that they did matter back in the day when you had pretty strong flip effects, things like Gravekeeper's Spy, that was really good, that was at 2000. Just in general, a lot of flip monsters really mattered if they had high or low stats because you were setting them in defense mode. As it stands right now though, there isn't a ton of reason to play things in defense mode. There certainly are reasons, but overall, attack mode's the way to go, and you can see Konami even pushing like the game towards that direction because Link monsters don't even have defense points. Obviously that's because if you turn them it would screw up the arrows, but overall it's just worth noting that Link monsters don't have defense points, and that those ones you can't even put in defense, so Konami is really just pushing towards attack position over and over again, and it's perfectly fine. I mean, there was a long period in Yu-Gi-Oh's history where like setting a monster and setting a back row was like the best opening in the game. I think I'm fine where we are now, where it's not just always setting face down cards. Do you think that Yu-Gi-Oh will continue to introduce new summoning mechanics based around the extra deck? If not, what in your opinion is one possible change to the master rules that could happen in the next era? Funny story, I actually said for months after I was playing Duel Links that, hey, I think that the next big like extra deck mechanic, or the next big mechanic in the game isn't going to be extra deck based. I thought for sure they were going to add skill cards to the TCG as like physical cards. Then lo and behold, they made the speed dueling format like a couple months after I started talking about that, and yeah, you have physical skill cards. Now obviously that's not for the actual TCG format, but I don't think it's that far-fetched to think that Konami would want to push something like that. I think right now the barrier to entry is so high. I still wish with pendulums they would have just kept doing those and then made cards with scales that have different numbers on each side, because we never got a pendulum that didn't have the exact same scales. Makes the cards look a little silly seeing you have two scale options but they're always the same number. That's kind of weird. But overall I really didn't think that they were going to do another extra deck mechanic because yeah, the barrier for entry right now is ridiculous. I can't even imagine how people that are like just starting the game are actually learning stuff. I feel like they probably should just be taught Link monsters and then say just don't play Synchros, Xyzs, or Fusions or Rituals. Just don't worry about those. Let your opponent explain it to you. But yeah, I think skill cards are still pretty likely. One thing that's interesting is that these skill cards that are in Duel Links and even in Speed Dueling would probably be too good for the TCG. Any of the ones like that add a card from your deck to your hand are just like crazy when you put them in the context of how powerful the TCG decks are. So if they added skill cards to TCG, the skills would have to be like much worse than they are in Duel Links, which is kind of an interesting dynamic. The less powerful cards you have, the more powerful skills you have. So in the TCG where you have really powerful cards, you have to have less powerful skills. I'm not sure if that's actually marketable, but I don't know. Konami's going to have to do something. These extra deck mechanics are getting a little bit out of hand for newer players. What do you recommend when trying to make a weaker deck playable? And I have a lot of experience with this. I like a lot of weaker decks out there. I would say the best piece of advice is to not necessarily just do what that strategy is supposed to do, but just find what it does best and then just make an entire deck revolving around that. For example, if you're trying to play a volcanic strategy, don't make a volcanic strategy centered around like summoning volcanic Doomfire or all the other volcanic cards. Just realize that you have cards like Rocket and Scattershot and Shell, and that those are the good volcanics. Just play those in a deck and then sort of build a strategy up from there. If you're playing a weaker deck, you don't have to play all of the cards in the archetype. You don't even have to play the majority of the cards in the archetype. Just find which cards actually are winning you games and have some potential, and then play those cards in a deck and then sort of make that deck around that particular strategy, not necessarily what strategy Konami intended it to actually accomplish. What video was hardest for you to create, either because of needing to do research, technical challenges, trouble forming a strong opinion, or whatever you may have considered a challenge? You know, I've said this before, I'll say it again though, the hardest videos to make and the reason that they take so long is the Why Nobody Plays videos. The reason that those ones are so hard is because I know that each of those is probably going to get a lot of views, and it's going to be viewed by a lot of people that disagree with my opinion. And when people disagree with you, you have to make sure that every single word you say means something and actually has like weight to it. So when I make those videos, like I record everything in like 30-second to 1-minute clips. When I do normal videos, it's usually like 2-minute clips or 3-minute clips, and then I sort of divide it up by that when I'm editing. But when I do those videos, I pretty much like clip it after every like paragraph that I'm saying, just because I wanted that one paragraph, each individual paragraph, to be perfect as I'm talking about it, just because I know that those videos, more so than anything else I post, are going to be analyzed to every single detail. For example, I'm still regretting that I didn't, in the Winged Dragon of Ra discussion on the first Why Nobody Plays Egyptian God Cards video, I like briefly mentioned that like Winged Dragon of Ra, you must pay like all of your life points except 100. What I meant by that is that you have to pay all the life points, but what a lot of people took it as is that it's a mandatory effect. So I got literally hundreds of comments from people. I mean, there's obviously a lot of bad comments in the video, but I got hundreds of comments from people that I shouldn't have gotten, that said things like, oh, you don't actually have to pay the life points, are you stupid? Because in those types of situations, if someone already disagrees with your opinion, if you put out like one wrong fact, one wrong statement, well, now they just invalidate like your entire video to them, because they're just like, well, he got this one thing wrong, so what else could he possibly get wrong? You know, probably the whole video just is wrong. So I really have to be careful in those videos, especially when I'm thinking of like the Exodia video. I had to do a lot of research into like older websites to see if Exodia actually had topped back in the day. I know the least about like the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I was just playing super casually like in elementary school. So if you notice, most of my discussions start around like 2008, but I'm not really like familiar with 2002 to 2008 as much as I would be with like the newer formats or even anything after 2008. So when I'm thinking of like older decks, I'm just like, well, did Exodia like top? Because I remember people talking about it when I was in elementary school, but that's like a really warped perspective on competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! So I had to go back and look at like a lot of older websites, a lot of older deck lists, and see if Exodia actually had topped a lot more than I thought it did. Turns out I was right though, and it didn't top back in the day, but it's still worth checking just because of what I just said. And lastly, if you were in charge of fixing the bloated effects boxes in the cards, how would you do it? Keywords, abbreviations, maybe even symbols, and regardless of the method, how fast would you implement it? To be completely honest, I think I have the opinion that most people disagree with here. I actually think that problem-solving card text is like the easiest way to read Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I really hate symbols. Like, I just hate them so much in text boxes. As someone that has tried to play many card games, I always struggle the most with the ones that have symbols, and the reason is that when you read a Yu-Gi-Oh card, you can just read it. You don't have to have like a glossary next to you. Obviously, it helps if you have a glossary next to you, especially when you're like just starting out. Maybe you don't know what like target means, maybe you don't know what discard means, but overall, you can read it. It's all words. So the reason that it's so hard for me to pick up games like, I know, like Force of Will, and I think Vanguard and stuff like that, and Magic and stuff like that, all those have symbols in text boxes, so the text box itself is shorter. It's a little bit easier to read if you know what the symbols mean. But when you're just starting out as a new player, and Yu-Gi-Oh is already a very complicated game, having to open a glossary, have the rulebook next to you while you're learning to play, just because you don't understand what every like symbol means out of like the 50 symbols that they give you, that is a really discouraging experience for newer players. So I think that Yu-Gi-Oh overall is fine just the way it is. I think it's cool that they have made some strides. I mean, you have like remove from play now means, or banish now means remove from play and stuff. That's really helpful. You had piercing implemented instead of like the super. Piercing used to be like a 3-line text box in every single monster that had piercing. It was terrible. You also have like graveyard being abbreviated to GY, which is kind of funny. But overall, I think Yu-Gi-Oh cards, if you know problem solving card text, and if you understand problem solving card text, like if you just take an afternoon to learn what that is, I think Yu-Gi-Oh cards read just fine. More so, the problem and the reason that Yu-Gi-Oh cards are so long is because they have so many effects, not that they necessarily aren't being written in the shortest way possible. So if Yu-Gi-Oh cards keep having like 4 or 5 effects, well, yeah, no matter what you do, even if you put a bunch of symbols, it's still going to be a pretty long piece of text box. Anyway though, hope you guys enjoyed today's Q&A video for 90k subscribers. It is super exciting to be this close to 100k. We'll be putting out some awesome content over the next couple months to sort of get there with flying colors. But I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Goodbye.